Many retirees spend decades saving, and then, as they near retirement, some of them are hit with a wall, which could include confusion, fear, uncertainty, and even the thought of bad timing. There is a silver lining here, though. Putting some planning in place can help you feel like you're more educated and empowered to make the decision that's best for your situation. In today's video, I'm going to bring you a compilation of some of the most highly engaged content that pre-retirees found useful throughout this year's videos that Rockline put out. And with that, let's start with a shift that might change everything. A quote that is near and dear to me goes something like this: "Time is your most valuable asset because once it's gone, you cannot get it back." As you may know if you've owned a house for a while, there are a bunch of potential unknowns that could come up over time, such as a leaky roof, a broken pipe, a broken appliance, whatever the case may be. And the fact of the matter is, these type of things do come up and they can take up your time and derail you from your day. In addition, they probably also will add to a level of stress. Downsizing could potentially lead to less of these headaches. Less home or less property could potentially lead to less issues. I've actually heard in many instances, living somewhere like in an HOA or a community provides a great lifestyle, as you don't need to worry about certain things as far as maintenance is concerned, such as shoveling snow. Another factor in this shift is how retirement is funded and has been funded over the past few decades. In previous years, pensions might have accounted for a larger sum of money, whereas today, more people rely on their own savings with regards to 401ks and IRAs. And here's a mindset shift that could be a game changer. Rather than chasing that generic number, consider really honing in on your spending and understand what your monthly income needs are. Will you maintain your current lifestyle, or do you plan on cutting back? Are there expenses like mortgages, other outstanding debt, or helping family members that you need to take into account? Answering these questions and really having a full understanding of what your expenses are can give you a better idea of your overall picture, again, as opposed to chasing that random number. Let's take this a step further. Another way that you might aim to stress test your assets is after you calculate your annual retirement expenses, multiply that number by 25 years. And that can give you a ballpark figure for the number that you're going to need for retirement. It's very similar to the thought process around the 4% withdrawal rule. Another approach is to aim for an income replacement percentage. And this number might fall somewhere between 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. Although these are broad guidelines, they can give you a more realistic idea of what your needs actually are, as opposed to understanding the averages. As you know, in 1620, the Pilgrims boarded the Mayflower to come across in search of new beginnings. After an arduous trek, they eventually landed in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. They then set out on a journey to explore in hopes of finding and settling a new land. After about a month of navigating the area and many interactions with the natives, they decided that ultimately the best place to settle would be Plymouth. You're probably wondering at this point where in the heck I'm going with this, and I'm going to tell you. My third point is to fully explore, experience, and understand any place that you think you might relocate in retirement. We've seen more recently, actually, that many pre-retirees, or even those that are newly retired, might go and rent in multiple locations over the course of time to fully understand the environment that they might end up in. Either way, having a solid feel and understanding for a place that you might consider relocating for the rest of your life is something that could be a meaningful decision. When it comes to inflation, something that might shock you is a modest 3% rate of inflation over the course of 25 years can almost cut your spending power in half. The value of $200,000 in today's dollars decreases over that time to almost $100,000 in spending power. And this is why we bake in adjustment inflations when walking through planning with our clients. In addition, we make sure that we're reviewing their budgeting and spending on a regular basis. I feel strongly that the overlying takeaway here is that building and implementing a plan helps you have flexibility. In addition, it's very important to remember that every journey starts with one step forward. Although it could be time-consuming and stressful to gather all of your financial information for the course of 3 to 6 months, it can also help you feel empowered and educated about your specific situation. This exercise could end up being a major difference in just simply hoping that your money lasts as long as you do versus spending your money confidently in retirement. Have you been saving your entire life waiting for retirement, but instead of making the shift from saving to spending and enjoying it, you're too nervous to actually start using that money? If so, you're not alone. According to the 2024 Retirement Confidence Survey, just 68% of workers and 74% of retirees felt that they had saved enough money to live comfortably in retirement. When portfolios operate over time without a systematic plan in place to both monitor and rebalance, risks might be hiding under the hood of the portfolio, and this might not be apparent until market conditions change. In addition to the concentration risk we briefly hit on earlier, there's another risk I want to talk about, and that is liquidity risk. And liquidity risk tends to arise when folks end up needing money in a pinch. And at that time, you might end up finding out that the investments that you thought you could take money out of at any time are not readily available. In addition to concentration risk and liquidity risk, comes sequence of return risk, which is the potential that you might experience a downturn at a time right near or after retirement when you most need to take that money out. And it's great that I've listed these risks out for you, but you're probably wondering, what can you do about them? Well, I will tell you, for us, it's often about having a process. Having the ability to remove emotion from our decision making and understanding why and what changes need to be made at what time. Now here's what many fail to talk about when thinking about retirement planning. I would argue that the biggest threat to your retirement plan is not necessarily overspending your money, but rather not having an understanding where the money is going. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average person age 65 or older spends about $51,000 a year. But here's the shocking part. Retirees often underestimate their expenses by a whopping 30 to 50%. And here's something we watch all too commonly. Retirees take the step into retirement very confidently that they have planned for all that life will throw their way, only to end up watching themselves spend away their money like water breaking through a dam. The question then that keeps us up at night is, what if we've been thinking about retirement spending and budgeting completely wrong this whole time? Let me tell you about a hypothetical prospect, and we'll call her Sarah, that we met with recently. She worked her entire life, saving up a modest nest egg of $1 million, and she thought she had everything planned and accounted for. She ran her numbers over and over again, and she felt that she was able to cruise into the sunsets. But, with that said, by month 6 of her retirement, she ended up seeing that she was spending a little over $3,000 a month in excess of what she had planned for. The culprit here? It wasn't one make or break expense. It essentially was death by 1,000 cuts. This money was going towards things like forgotten gym memberships, subscription fees to streaming services, excess money spent on travel, you name it. Small leaks when handled on their own. However, when they add up, small leaks can turn into financial sinkholes. What Sarah quickly discovered, and what I'm going to reveal to you today, is that budgeting and spending during your retirement years follow a different set of rules than budgeting and spending while you're working. According to the recent data by Vanguard, the average 401k balance for people in their mid-50s to their mid-60s is about $244,750. For those in their mid-40s to mid-50s, that number is closer to $191,000. And for savers between their mid-30s and mid-40s, their average 401k balance is about $97,000. Now, although there is an idea that there's a magic number out there as far as retirement savings are concerned, which, in doing some reading, that number tends to fall somewhere around 1.26 million, the real question becomes, how is it relevant to your situation? When you take a minute to digest the recent data cited by Kiplinger, for instance, the median 401k balance for those between the ages of 55 and 64 is about $185,000, while the median balance for those between ages 65 and 74 is closer to $200,000. The significant gap between the assumed target of 1.26 million and the reality of what the numbers are between the different age groups brings to question, what does it mean for you? A big reason for the disconnect here is that this number cited of 1.26 million is a generalized number and doesn't take into account your personal situation. It's based on average expectations with regards to lifestyle, time in retirement, and expenses over time, which again are different for everyone. Some people could end up needing far less than 1.26 million should they decide to do things like downsize in retirement, move to a less expensive area, or moderate their lifestyle spending. Others, however, could need in excess of $10 million for retirement, particularly those that were higher income earners during their working years, have higher expenditures on things like housing or assets that require maintenance, or prefer more luxurious lifestyle experiences and vacations. While it's easy for us to see why so many people will fixate on the headlines as far as 401k numbers and averages are concerned, it can sometimes feel like a measuring stick. And if your assets are not up to par with what you read, you could feel like you're far behind. But the reality is, averages don't always tell the whole story. Right now, there are probably many retirees that are following advice that could have been acceptable a couple of decades ago, but could actually end up being very detrimental to their plan today. The reason being, following the conventional wisdom when it comes to retirement withdrawals is not a one-size-fits-all scenario. And unfortunately, you might not realize this until it's too little, too late. Meet Jane, a 68-year-old teacher from Ohio who thought she did everything right. She accumulated over $1 million in her 403b over the course of her career. She followed advice that had been given to her at some point, which was to spend down her taxable assets first and let her 403b continue to grow. 5 years later, Jane ended up getting hit with a tax bill that made her sick to her stomach. She owed $15,000 on distributions that she was forced to take out. Money that she did not necessarily need, but had to withdraw due to her required minimum distributions. And now, she was left owing a hunk of it to Uncle Sam. Jane's story isn't unique, unfortunately, and in fact, we see it happen more often than not when retirees neglected to plan for this situation early on. Here's what Jane didn't know. There's a mandatory withdrawal rule called required minimum distributions, which occurs at age 73 as it stands today. And if you follow the old advice of let your tax-deferred accounts continue to grow, you could end up facing RMDs that could cause a real tax nightmare. But here's where things get interesting, and might actually completely change the way that you think about retirement planning today. Research by Fidelity has shown that retirees that use differing withdrawal sequences can actually end up cutting their lifetime tax bill by almost 40%. Yes, you heard that right. Cutting taxes by almost 40% just by simply planning and executing and utilizing differing withdrawal strategies. So what are they doing differently, you might ask? Well, instead of using the common sequential withdrawal approach, they might end up utilizing what we prefer to call the proportional withdrawal approach. Think of it like this. If your taxable investments equate to 30% of your overall holdings, your pre-tax investments equal 50% of your overall holdings, and your Roth investments equal 20% of your overall holdings, you end up withdrawing proportionately across the three different types of accounts. Now, let's take a look at this Roth catch-up rule set to take place January 1 of 2026. The rule in plain terms states, if your FICA wages from the year before equate to $145,000 or more from the employer sponsoring the plan, you are now forced to make catch-up contributions as a Roth contribution. This income test is not based on your modified adjusted gross income, it's not based on your household income, and it is not based on your combined wages. It is solely based on your FICA wages from the employer sponsoring the plan in which you're contributing to. This threshold is also adjusted for inflation over time. So theoretically, that number should rise as you get older. And this distinction can be crucial because it could give different outcomes for workers making similar amounts of income. Consider two individuals, each making $150,000 a year. Employee 1 earns $150,000 of FICA wages all from one employer. Employee 2 earns $90,000 of FICA wages from that particular employer and $60,000 in additional self-employment earnings. Although both workers end up having about $150,000 in wages for the year, only $90,000 of employee number 2's FICA wages are captured because that is the only amount that comes from the employer sponsoring his particular plan. The caveat here, since employee 2's FICA wages fall below the $145,000 threshold, they still have the freedom and flexibility to elect whether they want to make pre-tax or Roth contributions when it comes to their catch-up. The big question became, would the Smith family end up trading the fact that they had financial freedom earlier on end up proving costly later in life? And, on the flip side, would the Jones family patience in waiting to claim their benefits end up proving to be the right decision for them? While actuarial tables might project one certain outcome, life doesn't always follow a stable path. 15 years later, their financial trajectories couldn't be more different, proving how one decision might seemingly be small, however, it could reverberate through your entire retirement planning future. The dramatic gap between these couples' financial situations by age 77 actually started to form within the first 5 years of them and their claiming strategies. Many retirees tend to focus on that immediate gratification in taking Social Security at age 62, while not having a full understanding of how their retirement account withdrawal rate could dramatically increase over time, especially if the unexpected occurs. The Smiths embraced their newfound freedom with enthusiasm, and after they went on their bucket list trips, they settled down to a retirement community where they were happy. Morning coffee on the patio, afternoon golf for John, and weekly dinner with friends became their norm. Initially, their Social Security income provided a great foundation for them, and their retirement withdrawals were relatively modest. By year 3, unexpected situations started to arise. Their retirement community announced a 15% increase in their monthly fees, and that $450 per month increase in costs was not covered by the Social Security income. Despite the cost of living adjustments of roughly 2% per year to Social Security, their income ended up falling much short of their actual expenses over time. The Smiths found themselves cutting back on simple pleasures, stopping the weekly dinners at restaurants, John cutting back on his golfing, and going out less with friends. To maintain their lifestyle, they ended up having to increase their withdrawal rate from their retirement accounts significantly. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the Joneses found great joy in their part-time work. Robert's consulting work allowed him supplemental income, in addition to the feeling of keeping his mind sharp, while Sarah was able to continue to teach piano lessons, bring in income, and find joy in watching other people succeed. Their retirement savings over the course of this time remained untouched, growing to about $575,000, or a 15% increase over the course of that 5 years. A Roth conversion consists of taking money from a traditional retirement account and converting it to a Roth retirement account, essentially changing when you'll pay tax on that money. With traditional retirement accounts, you receive a deduction on your income up front, your earnings grow tax deferred, and you pay taxes on any money that you withdraw. With a Roth, you don't get the deduction up front, but any potential earnings and withdrawals in the future are tax-free. Here's where the magic happens. By strategically converting portions of your pre-tax retirement into Roth accounts in the years leading up to reaching RMD age, you might have the ability to lessen the blow when you do have to take RMDs out. The timing of these conversions can be crucial as well. In an ideal world, you'd want to do them in years where your income is lower in comparison to your working years. So this could be, if you're fortunate enough to retire prior to RMD age, all of the years added up before RMD age. Instead of waiting for RMD age, they could consider implementing a 10-year Roth conversion strategy whereby they convert $50,000 a year each year for 10 years into a Roth account. Yes, although you'll pay taxes on that money now, you might theoretically be at a lower tax bracket. In addition, you've converted $500,000 of pre-tax money into Roth money over that period of time, which again could grow, and any withdrawals that you end up taking out are completely tax-free. What I like about this strategy is that it addresses multiple tax situations that we spoke about earlier. Not only through these conversions could you potentially reduce or even eliminate your required minimum distributions, you'll also now have a tax-free bucket of money to use in retirement, which could provide you with more flexibility.